Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. So the divorcee Sam Seder was using one of his patented arguments to prove his opponents are really bad people, and if he proves that, he wins something. The entire transcript will be on Rumble. For your information, just for the heck of it, just so you know that. The divorcee Sam Seder was having a hissy fit that biological males aren't going to be able to hang out with little girls in the women's restroom, and mentioned that a bill in Tennessee banning biological males, a bill going through the legislature, banning biological males from hanging out with minor females is getting the support of literal Nazis, like real Nazis and stuff, like Hitler, like Goebbels. Like tell people something long enough and loud enough and they'll believe it. Bad logic, Sam Seder. Bad logic, old man. I could state that young black men tend to murder young black men at a rate much higher than any other demographic, and they tend to drop out of school much more often than whites. I could also mention that blacks always, you can find any school district with an enrollment of over 5,000, and blacks will be lagging behind whites and Asians in graduation rates and SAT scores. And you can't just pick two people. It's got to be at least a 5,000 enrollment, at least 150 on each side. I could say all that. All that is true, and the KKK or any organization that you want to use to buttress your argument could concur with me. It doesn't mean much. It's still the truth. Young black men kill young black men at a high rate. Blacks score lower find any same school district. They're going to lower at graduation rates, lower test scores than whites and Asians. You can bank on it. Oh my gosh, you're racist. No, it's the truth. Oh, but the KKK did a commercial, and they agreed with you. That means you're a racist. No, it just means somebody who's slimy agrees with me when I say the truth. I could say 2 + 2 = 4, and every hate organization in the universe would probably agree. Doesn't mean those who believe 2 + 2 = 4 are Nazis or anything else. The divorcee Sam Seder might say 2 + 2 = 4 is universally accepted and not a good example. I'm sure some Islamic extremists would concur with Karl Marx's incendiary comments about Jews. It doesn't make him or you, Stan, an ally to Islam. You need to read some material from Douglas N. Walton. Ted Kennedy opposed tax cuts for the rich and committed negligent manslaughter. Ted Kennedy also cheated on his wife. Sam Seder opposes tax cuts for people who make lots of money and have nuclear families. Does that make Sam Seder a slimy fat kook like Ted Kennedy? Bill Clinton has a share of issues. Oddly, divorce is not one of them, but it is for you, right, Stan? Bill Clinton has issues and wants taxes raised on folks like my boss who are millionaires. Sam Seder also supports that. Uh-oh, Stan. Guilt by association. Third grade logic. If Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders agree on a lot on foreign policy, it doesn't mean much because outside of that, they have little in common. Even you're not dumb enough to make that leap, old man. If I visit a prison and interview a child molester who thinks U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine is a great idea, does that mean those who support U.S. involvement in Ukraine are literal child molesters or just child molesters by proxy? Or is it just a dumb argument that only a mental midget would use? Another argument that Sam Seder likes to beat to death is, so we've dealt with that. That's the stupid. Just pointing out that, bad people support this argument. That means you're like bad people. No. Bad logic. Another argument that Sam Seder likes to beat to death is the hypocrite argument. Like, Stan, you remember when you said, you know what they say about divorcees? And that was several years before your wife left you. Oops. For example, Sam Seder was flapping his flabby jowls over Kim Davis, who has been divorced like Sam Seder has. He was whining about Kim Davis being against homosexual marriage, yet she has been divorced. Hypocrite, he autistically repeated while frothing at the mouth. Are people not allowed to change their minds, Stan? John Newton was knee-deep in the slave trade, but wrote the song Amazing Grace. So can I repeat hypocrite over and over as my entire argument, or would John Newton say if he were alive today, quote, take your Risperdal, and listen up, I changed my views. I realized slavery was evil and is evil, which is precisely why I turned away from it, end quote. Hypocrite! You're a hypocrite who opposes slavery, yet you own slaves. Hypocrite! Only mentally ill lunatics use such arguments. What if I run into a guy who works for an organization that opposes drug abuse? Sorry for that noise. And organization that opposes drug abuse and wants to prohibit people from using and abusing fentanyl. And that guy turns out to be a drug addict himself. Can I just shout, hypocrite, and win the argument? Or can I say, quote, despite the fact that you are a drug-addled person, I can concur that drug abuse is a bad thing and nobody should do it. How about a father who was an alcoholic, a raging alcoholic, walks up to a son who is currently an alcoholic and says, son, and let's say he's drinking a 12-pack every night, son, you really need to quit drinking. I'm concerned about you. It's going to shorten your life. And the son says, oh, Dad, I remember, Dad, when you used to drink a lot. Hypocrite. Does that mean his advice is wrong? Or father could still be a heavy drinker. Even if he said, Jeffrey Dahmer, if he was alive today and walked up to me and said, you know what, you shouldn't kill people and chop them up and eat them. I'd say, you know what, Jeff, despite the fact that you did that to a lot of people, you know what, you're right. Or can I just say, hypocrite? Wow. Finding my place again. Here's another example. Let's say we have a person who is divorced. Let's say this person has also had sex outside of marriage numerous times and was never able to finish school in California. Let's say this person has a few kids and one of them says they intend to have sex as a minor with numerous people at parties because they can get away with it. Let's say this person who's divorced and has had sex outside of marriage numerous times, never having a successful relationship, I can hardly talk, with the opposite gender of their species. Let's say they tell their kid, you should not do that, you're too immature to handle that. If the kid just shrieked, hypocrite, like a raging lunatic, would that answer the argument, or is there more to it than that? Even Sam Seder is starting to realize how dumb he sounds when he makes these arguments. Another example, I could mention a majority of House Democrats voted for 2 rounds of Ronald Reagan's personal income tax cuts. Whenever Sam Seder whines about people who make more money than he does and folks who have actual property. If Sam Seder whines about those people getting tax cuts, can I mention those House Democrats under Reagan voting for those tax cuts and autistically repeat, hypocrite? If Bill Clinton was found out to be a predator, wait, never mind, sorry. Let's say Bill Clinton was found out to have used the N-word in an unreleased speech, and he used it many times. Let's say Bill Clinton is a flaming racist. Just work with me, folks. Would that negate the fact that he was a decent president who worked with a GOP in Congress better than George W. Bush did at controlling runaway spending? Would it negate the fact that Bill Clinton had a great economy during his presidency? Or can I just shout, quote, predator cheated on his wife? Or in my hypothetical, can I just shout racist instead of arguing? I do have one more example. I remember in one of Sam Seder's videos, he was grinding his teeth over abortion and said about those having kids that were conceived because of rape. He said, quote, if you want to have a rape baby, have a rape baby. If you do not want to have a rape baby, do not have it, end quote. Some of us turn 30 and drop these bad arguments, and some of us are elderly, still using these bad arguments. Let me try my version. We've all used this or saw this at one time or another. Quote, if you don't like a homosexual marriage, don't have a homosexual marriage. If you don't like cocaine, don't use cocaine. If you don't like abortion, don't have an abortion. If you don't like gas guzzling SUVs, don't own gas guzzling SUVs. Or this one is really good, quote, if you don't like slaves, don't own slaves. Oh, wait, I guess there is a bit more to it than that. It's not so simple a third grader could understand it, but why then does Sam Seder think he has it all figured out? Sam Seder's reasoning, and I'm being generous calling it reasoning, his reasoning is oddly adolescent. Thanks for listening. Sam Seder uses some really dumb arguments, and I am not sure how much of it is because he's just a big dumb goof who does not know any better, and how much of it is catering to his IQ of a vegetable audience. Have a nice day, and don't thank me now. I'm coming back, I'm coming back just like Columbo. I do need to add this. Hillary Clinton opposed homosexual marriage for most of her career, yet the divorcee, Sam Seder, voted for her. Sam Seder is an advocate for homosexuals. Can I just say, Sam Seder voted for a hypocrite, and that settles it? Sam Seder might ask me, quote, did you not just say that people could change their mind, end quote? I would respond, quote, so, you must be negating a lot of the logic you use when you employ the hypocrite argument. Right, Stan? End quote. And Stan would nod his head in approval and then drop it in shame. I would argue that John Newton changed his mind not to win an election, not to curry favor with Democrat voters, but because he was convicted of his sin and repented. Hillary Clinton only came out in favor of homosexual marriage after she figured that the majority of the public was in favor of it. So, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.